The first time I saw her, she was standing alone on the observation deck of the starship Elysium, staring at the void of space with an expression that made it clear she didn't belong, or perhaps that no one truly belonged around her. I had been assigned as a liaison between the human crew and the alien diplomats on this joint exploration mission, and I had already heard whispers about her. She was the youngest princess of the Aquilari, a species renowned for their beauty, intelligence, and unmatched diplomatic skill. But despite all that, the crew often spoke of her in hushed tones, using words like aloof, unapproachable, and most hauntingly lonely. The Aquilari were a proud people, their culture steeped in ritual and hierarchy, with subtle displays of respect and affection that humans often misread or ignored entirely. From what I'd learned, she had been surrounded by courtiers, tutors, and advisors her entire life, yet none of them had ever truly seen her. She was a figure of perfection in the eyes of her society, yet perfection alone could not shield a soul from loneliness. When I was introduced to her, it was in the formal setting of the ship's briefing room. She wore the traditional ceremonial attire of her people, a long, flowing garment that shimmered with pigments that changed with every shift of light. Her eyes, large and luminescent, scanned me with what I could only describe as quiet curiosity, not suspicion. The human crew had briefed me on proper etiquette, but all the rules and lessons evaporated under the weight of her gaze. It was disarming, the kind of look that could pierce through protocol and reach something deeper. I extended my hand, as the human custom dictated. "I'm Lieutenant Adrian Cross," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'll be your liaison during the mission." She inclined her head slightly, just enough to acknowledge me, and replied in perfect galactic standard, her voice soft yet commanding. "Lieutenant Cross, I have heard of humans. I wonder if you can see beyond the ceremonies and the courtesies." "Few do." I felt an unexpected spark of intrigue, and, truth be told, a little fear. She was testing me already, and I hadn't even been in her presence for 5 minutes. Over the first few days, I observed her from a distance during formal gatherings. She spoke politely but minimally, her interactions with the crew almost non-existent except for the obligatory diplomatic gestures. And yet, I noticed the way her shoulders slumped in private moments, the way she lingered by the observation deck long after the others had left. She seemed to float through the corridors untouchable, yet weighed down by an invisible gravity of neglect. One evening, during a routine systems check in the engine bay, I caught her staring at the machinery with a look of quiet frustration. I approached, careful not to startle her. "Do you need assistance?" I asked. She turned toward me, her eyes flickering with surprise that anyone would care to ask. "I could manage," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Yet you asked anyway." Most would not. And that was it. That small acknowledgement, it was enough to shatter the barrier she had built around herself. I offered to stay and help her, not out of duty, but because I wanted to. The engines were complex, the interface unlike anything humans had designed. And yet, as we worked together, something extraordinary happened. She spoke freely, asking questions not about the mission, but about the machinery itself, about the principles behind it, about the ways humans had solved similar problems. Her curiosity was genuine, and for the first time, I saw her light up, not as a princess, not as a diplomat, but as an individual. "You humans," she said, almost laughing, "you find a way to make the impossible seem natural." I smiled. "We try. But sometimes the impossible is just waiting for someone brave enough to try." She studied me, her eyes scanning for some hidden truth. "Bravery. I have been told it is rare among humans." "Perhaps," I said, shrugging, "or perhaps it's only rare until someone asks you to be brave for them." The conversation lingered in the air longer than either of us anticipated. And in that silence, I realized something important. She had never been treated as an equal, never been seen as more than the sum of her titles and expectations. And yet, she didn't just deserve to be seen, she deserved to be cherished. Days turned into weeks, and our connection grew in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. I learned to anticipate her moods, to understand the unspoken language of her expressions. I brought her small gifts from Earth, books with stories of humans exploring the unknown, gadgets that demonstrated ingenuity rather than opulence. She began to respond, not with the formal politeness of a royal, but with genuine warmth. One evening, I found her alone in the hydroponics bay, tending to alien plants I hadn't known existed. They were delicate, luminescent flora that seemed to pulse with life in her presence. "You have a way of making things flourish," I remarked. She looked at me, a shadow of sadness crossing her features. "Perhaps because I have never been allowed to," she whispered. "All my life, I have been told how to act, how to think, how to appear, never how to feel." I took a careful step closer. "Then let me change that. Let me show you how it feels to be valued, not for your title, not for your perfection, but for who you truly are." Her gaze held mine, and in that moment, I understood the weight of the walls she had built. And yet, she did not push me away. She allowed me to cross the threshold, as if daring herself to believe that someone might finally see her. It was not an instant transformation. There were days when she withdrew, haunted by the years of neglect, the constant pressure to perform, to be untouchable. And there were moments when I faltered, unsure if I was overstepping, unsure if a human could ever bridge the gap between duty and intimacy in a culture so alien. But I persisted. I listened when she spoke, even when her words were laced with melancholy. I celebrated her triumphs, no matter how small. I defended her from those who underestimated her or treated her as a figurehead. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, she began to respond, not out of obligation, not out of necessity, but out of trust, curiosity, and perhaps something that resembled hope. The turning point came during a diplomatic summit on the planet Virilia, where tensions between human and aquilari interests threatened to erupt into conflict. Delegates argued, alliances wavered, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes, not the fear of failure, but the fear of isolation. She had spent her life carrying burdens no one could understand, and now the weight threatened to crush her. Without thinking, I took her hand. It was a small gesture, but in that moment, it carried all the significance of 1,000 ceremonies. "You are not alone," I said. "Not here, not ever. I see you, all of you, and I will stand by you as a friend, as an ally, as something more if you'll allow it." Her eyes widened, tears glinting in the glow of the summit lights. And then, for the first time, she smiled. Not the measured smile of royalty, but a genuine, radiant expression that lit up her entire being. The summit ended without incident. Delegates praised her diplomacy, but I knew the real victory had been something more intimate. She had begun to believe in herself, in her worth, in the possibility that someone could love her, not the idea of her, not the role she played, but her. In the weeks that followed, our bond deepened. We shared stories of our respective worlds, laughed at the absurdities of culture, and reveled in the small, human pleasures that her society often overlooked: a shared meal, the warmth of a hand, the simple act of being together without expectation. And then came the night that changed everything. The Elysium was anchored near a binary star system, its twin suns casting long shadows across the deck. She had invited me to walk with her, her usual reticence replaced by a quiet anticipation. "I have spent so long feeling invisible," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Even surrounded by those who should love me, I felt unseen, unwanted." I stopped walking and turned to face her. "Then let me be the one to see you," I said. "To truly see you, every part of you that the world ignores. You deserve nothing less than to be treated like the royalty you are, not for your title, but for your heart." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and in that moment, the loneliness that had haunted her for so long seemed to dissolve. She stepped closer, her hand finding mine once more. "I never thought I could feel this way," she confessed. "But with you, I am not afraid. I am seen. I am loved." It was a declaration that needed no ceremony, no ritual, no witness. In the quiet expanse of space, amidst stars that had watched civilizations rise and fall, a human and an alien princess found a connection that transcended titles, expectations, and loneliness. From that night onward, she moved with a new confidence, a joy that radiated through her every action. The crew noticed the change, though none could fully explain it. She was still a princess, still brilliant and poised, but now she carried something more powerful than any title, the knowledge that she was cherished, respected, and loved for who she truly was. I watched her once from the observation deck, her silhouette framed against the swirling nebula beyond. She smiled at me, a silent acknowledgement that spoke louder than any words. In that moment, I realized that humanity's greatest gift was not our technology, our ingenuity, or even our courage. It was our capacity to see the value in another being, to honor them, and to love them unconditionally, even across the vast gulf of species and culture. And she, the princess who had felt unloved for so long, finally knew what it meant to be treated like royalty, not because of her heritage, but because someone had chosen to see her heart. She looked up at me one last time as the twin suns dipped below the horizon of Aurelia, casting long golden streaks across the deck. Her usual composure was gone, replaced by a vulnerability that made her seem smaller, yet infinitely more magnificent. "Adrian," she whispered, her voice trembling, "thank you for seeing me." I took her hands in mine, feeling the pulse of life and energy in her delicate fingers. "You've always been extraordinary," I said softly. "I only gave you what you deserved, someone to remind you of it." A gentle breeze stirred the deck panels, carrying the faint scent of alien blossoms from the hydroponics bay. She leaned into me, resting her head against my shoulder. For the first time, I felt the weight of centuries of isolation lift from her, replaced by something far stronger: trust, hope, and love. The stars stretched endlessly above us, indifferent yet silently witnessing a human and a princess defy expectations, defy culture, and defy loneliness. She was no longer the untouchable figure everyone admired from afar. She was alive, radiant, and seen, not for her title or her perfection, but for the heart she had long hidden. "I never imagined I could feel this way," she murmured, closing her eyes. "You were always meant to," I replied. "You just needed someone brave enough to remind you." And in that quiet moment, amidst the infinite cosmos, the princess who had felt unloved finally understood what it truly meant to be cherished. She was royalty, not by decree or duty, but by the love and respect she had finally earned. And as she pulled back just enough to meet my gaze, I saw it there, a spark that could light entire worlds. From that day forward, she moved through life with a newfound grace, her heart open, her spirit unbound. And I, a human who had dared to see past protocol and titles, knew that sometimes The smallest acts of understanding and kindness could change the fate of a soul, and maybe even the course of the stars themselves. The princess was no longer alone, and in seeing her, I had witnessed something extraordinary, the power of truly being seen.